The ship fell from the sky like a dying star. It burned through the atmosphere of New Bizan, leaving a trail of black smoke across the morning clouds. Farmers in the fields below stopped their work and watched. They had never seen anything like it. The ship was not human. Its shape was wrong. Its metal was a color they could not name. It crashed into the rice fields 3 kilometers from the main colony. The impact shook the ground and sent water and mud flying in all directions. Within minutes, emergency teams were racing toward the crash site. Within an hour, the military had arrived. Admiral Taiho stood at the edge of the crater and looked down at the wreckage. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the fleet for 30 years. He had seen pirates, rebels, and criminals, but he had never seen an alien vessel this close to a human world. The rescue team cut through the twisted metal. Inside, they found 2 survivors. The first was a female alien, tall and thin, with skin that glowed faintly blue. She was badly injured. Blood of a strange silver color covered her arms and chest. In her arms, she held a small child of the same species. The child was breathing, but barely. Taiho ordered the medical team to take them to the colony hospital immediately. He followed in his own vehicle, watching the alien woman through the window. Her eyes were open, and she was looking at him. There was something in her gaze that he recognized. It was fear, but not fear for herself. Fear for her child. At the hospital, the doctors did their best. They had no knowledge of alien biology, but they learned quickly. The child stabilized first. The mother took longer. For 2 days, she lay unconscious while human scientists studied her ship's computer and tried to understand where she had come from. On the 3rd day, she woke up. Taiho was there when she opened her eyes. A translation device had been prepared using data from her ship. It was not perfect, but it worked well enough. The alien woman looked around the room. She saw the white walls, the human doctors, the machines keeping her alive. Then she saw Taiho. She tried to speak. Her voice was weak, but the translation device picked up her words. "Where's my daughter?" Taiho pointed to the small bed beside her. The child was sleeping peacefully, wrapped in a warm blanket. The alien woman's body relaxed. Tears of silver rolled down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving her." Taiho sat down beside the bed. He had many questions, but he started with the most important one. "What is your name? Where do you come from?" The alien woman took a deep breath. Her name was Lyra. She was a diplomat of a species called the Villani. Their homeworld was in a star system far from human space. She had been traveling for many weeks, searching for help. "Help with what?" Taiho asked. Lyra closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were filled with pain. "My world is dying," she said. "My people are being killed. We have no army. We have no weapons. We are artists, scientists, musicians. We create beauty. We do not know how to fight." She explained everything. A powerful empire called the Krath Dominion had invaded the Villani homeworld 6 months ago. The Krath were conquerors. They moved from system to system, taking what they wanted. Weaker species were captured and forced to work in their mines and factories. Those who resisted were killed. The Villani had tried to negotiate. They had offered their art, their technology, their knowledge. The Krath had laughed at them. They did not want art. They wanted slaves. "We sent messages to every species we knew," Lyra continued. "We begged for help. The Galactic Assembly told us they could not interfere. The Krath are too powerful, they said. The cost of war is too high. They told us to accept our fate." Taiho listened in silence. His hands were clenched into fists, but his face showed nothing. "We were about to give up," Lyra said. "But then we heard stories. Stories about a young species on the edge of the galaxy. A species that fights for the weak. a species that protects those who cannot protect themselves. She looked directly at Taiho. We heard about humans. Taiho did not know what to say. Humans were not a major power. They had only 3 star systems. Their fleet was small compared to the elder species. They had never fought a galactic war. But Lyra was not finished. I escaped with my daughter and a small group of survivors. We scattered across the galaxy, each group searching for someone who would help. Most of us did not make it. My ship was damaged. I thought we would die in space. But then we saw your world. She reached out and grabbed Taiho's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Please, she said. My people are dying. Every day, more of us are taken to the labor camps. Every day, more children lose their parents. We have nowhere else to go. No one else will help us. Taiho looked at her hand holding his. He thought about his own daughter, now grown and living on Earth. He thought about what he would do if someone threatened her. I cannot make this decision alone, he said finally. But I will make sure the right people hear your story. He stood up and walked to the door. Before he left, he turned back. How many of your people are still alive? Lyra's voice broke. When I left, there were still millions. But the Krath work fast. By now, she could not finish the sentence. Taiho nodded slowly. Then he contacted Earth Command and requested an emergency connection to Fleet Commander Yunji. Within 1 hour, Yunji had seen all the evidence. The recordings from Lyra's ship. The images of burning cities. The footage of Villani citizens being herded into transport vessels like animals. Yunji was a woman of few words. She had white hair, sharp eyes, and a reputation for being impossible to fool. She had lost her own family to violence long ago. She understood suffering better than most. When the footage ended, she sat in silence for a full minute. Then she gave her first order. Find out everything about the Krath Dominion. Every ship, every base, every weakness. I want a full report in 72 hours. The officer on the screen hesitated. Commander, are we considering military action? Against a galactic power? The Assembly will never approve. Yunji's expression did not change. I did not ask for the Assembly's opinion. Get me that report. She ended the transmission and looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, a peaceful species was being destroyed because no one was willing to help them. Somewhere out there, children were being separated from their parents. Somewhere out there, evil was winning because good people chose to do nothing. Not this time, Yunji thought. Not while I am in command. The Galactic Assembly met on a space station at the center of known space. It was a massive structure, built thousands of years ago by species that no longer existed. 12 elder species controlled the Assembly. They had kept peace in the galaxy for millennia through careful diplomacy and trade agreements. They believed that war was always the wrong answer. Ambassador Dohwan arrived at the station on a small human vessel. He was a quiet man with a calm face and patient eyes. He had spent 20 years as a diplomat, solving problems with words instead of weapons. But today, he was not sure words would be enough. The assembly chamber was enormous. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the seats, but only the 12 elder species had voting power. Everyone else was there to watch and listen. Dohwan walked to the center of the chamber. Above him, holographic screens displayed the symbol of United Earth. Around him, alien eyes watched with curiosity. Humans rarely spoke at the assembly. They were considered too young and too unimportant. Thank you for allowing me to address this gathering, Dohwan began. His voice was steady. I come before you today on behalf of the Villani people. A low murmur spread through the chamber. Most species knew what was happening to the Villani. They just did not want to talk about it. 6 months ago, the Krath Dominion invaded the Villani homeworld. Since then, over 2 million Volani citizens have been killed or enslaved. Their cities have been destroyed. Their culture is being erased. This is not war. This is genocide. Do-hwan pressed a button on his control panel. The holographic screens changed. Now they showed images from Lyra's ship. Cities burning. Families being torn apart. Children screaming as soldiers dragged them away from their parents. The chamber fell silent. The Volani are a peaceful people, Do-hwan continued. They have no military. They have no weapons. They create art and music and scientific discoveries that benefit the entire galaxy. And now they are being exterminated because they cannot defend themselves. He paused and looked around the chamber. Humanity requests that the Galactic Assembly authorize a joint military intervention to protect the Volani and stop the Krath. Dominion. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Speaker Morvith of the Sindari rose from his seat. The Sindari were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had gray skin, 4 arms, and eyes that showed no emotion. Ambassador Do-hwan, Morvith said, the Assembly appreciates humanity's concern for the Volani. However, we must consider the practical realities of this situation. Do-hwan's expression did not change, but his jaw tightened slightly. The Krath Dominion controls 17 star systems, Morvith continued. They have a fleet of over 8,000 warships. They provide essential minerals and resources to half the species in this chamber. A war against them would be economically devastating for the entire galaxy. Another elder species representative spoke up. The Volani, while unfortunate, are a small species with limited strategic importance. We cannot risk galactic stability for their sake. Do-hwan listened to each argument. The elder species talked about trade routes and resource allocation and diplomatic complexity. They talked about everything except the millions of people being killed. Finally, Morvith delivered the Assembly's decision. We advise humanity to remain neutral in this conflict. The Krath Dominion has never threatened Earth territory. We strongly recommend that you do not invite their attention. The Assembly will not authorize military action against the Krath at this time. Do-hwan stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by the most powerful species in the galaxy. They had just told him that the lives of millions of innocent people were less important than their trade agreements that he thought about Lyra. Still recovering in a hospital on New Bizon, he thought about her daughter, who might never see her homeworld again. He thought about all the Volani children who were being taken from their families at this very moment. Speaker Morvith, Do-hwan said slowly, may I respond? Morvith made a gesture of permission. Do-hwan took a deep breath. When he spoke again, his voice was different. It was harder, colder, and absolutely certain. My species has a saying, when good people do nothing, evil wins. Today, this assembly has chosen to do nothing. You have decided that trade is more important than lives. You have decided that comfort is more important than justice. You have made your choice. He began walking toward the exit. Humanity will make a different choice. Behind him, the chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted questions and warnings. Some demanded that he return. Others called for sanctions against Earth. Morvith's voice cut through the chaos. Ambassador, you cannot be considering military action against the Krath. They have conquered 40 species. They have never been defeated. What can one small civilization possibly do against such power? Do-hwan stopped at the door. He turned back to face the speaker. Watch, he said simply. Then he walked out. The trip back to Earth took 3 days. During that time, Do-hwan received hundreds of messages from other species. Some offered sympathy. Some offered warnings. A few small species quietly offered support, though they did not dare do so publicly. The Krath Dominion also sent a message. It was short and direct. We have heard that humans are asking questions about our operations in Volani space. This is not your concern. Stay away, or you will learn why we have never been defeated." Do-won forwarded the message to Fleet Commander Yoonji without comment. Yoonji read the message and smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been given exactly what she needed. "They think we are afraid," she said to Admiral Taiho, who was now on Earth for emergency planning. "They think we will back down like everyone else." Taiho nodded. "The intelligence reports are complete. The Krath are strong, but they are not invincible. They have never faced an enemy that refused to surrender. Every species they have conquered tried to negotiate at some point. That is how the Krath win. They make the fight seem hopeless, and their enemies give up." Yoonji stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the shipyards of Earth were already increasing production. Volunteers were arriving at training centers faster than they could be processed. "Then we give them something they have never seen before," she said. "An enemy that does not stop. An enemy that does not negotiate. An enemy that fights until there is nothing left to fight." She turned back to Taiho. "Begin full military preparation. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. I want the fleet ready to move in 12 months. Taiho hesitated for just a moment. "Commander, the Assembly will condemn us. We could face economic sanctions from half the galaxy. We could be isolated from all trade routes." Yoonji's eyes were cold and steady. "Let them condemn us. Let them sanction us. I would rather be hated by the entire galaxy than stand by while innocent people are slaughtered." She looked out at the stars again. "The Volani asked for our protection. They will have it. And the Krath will learn that there are some species in this galaxy who still believe in doing what is right." Taiho saluted and left to begin preparations. Outside, the shipyards burned bright through the night. Humanity was going to war. Humanity had never fought a galactic war. Their entire military history was filled with conflicts against each other. Humans against humans. Colony against colony. Nation against nation. But now, for the first time, they faced a common enemy. And everything changed. Fleet Commander Yoonji assembled the greatest military minds from every human world. Admiral Taiho was given command of the main strike fleet. General Jiwoo, a veteran of the Mars Rebellion, took charge of ground forces. Dr. Minho, a weapons researcher who had retired 10 years ago, was asked to return and develop new technology to counter Krath weapons. The Volani survivors helped in every way they could. There were only 12,000 of them scattered across human space, but they brought something more valuable than numbers. They brought information. Lyra, now recovered from her injuries, worked directly with human intelligence officers. She provided complete details about Krath military structure, their base locations, their patrol routes, and their weaknesses. The Volani had been watching the Krath for years, hoping to find a way to negotiate. Now that information would be used for a different purpose. The young pilot Sujin was among the first volunteers. She was 24 years old, born on a small colony in the outer systems. She had been flying cargo ships since she was 16. When she heard about the Volani, she traveled to Earth and enlisted immediately. The recruitment officer looked at her records. "You have no military training. Why do you think you can be a combat pilot?" Sujin did not hesitate. "I saw the footage of those children being taken from their parents. I could not sleep for 3 nights after. If I can fly a ship, I can fight. Give me a chance." The officer looked at her for a long moment. Then he signed her application. Sujin was not alone. Across human space, volunteers flooded the recruitment centers. Old soldiers came out of retirement. Young people left their jobs and their schools. Parents with children made arrangements for their families and reported for duty. On the colony world of New Seoul, a factory that made agricultural equipment converted to military production in 2 weeks. The workers did not complain about the longer hours or the harder work. They understood what was at stake. On Mars, a mining company donated its entire fleet of transport ships to the military. The company owner, a woman named Hai Jin, said simply, "We can mine more metal later. We cannot bring back the dead." The preparation took 14 months. During that time, the Krath Dominion continued their conquest. They conquered 2 more species, adding millions more slaves to their labor camps. The Galactic Assembly watched and issued statements of concern. They did nothing else. Dr. Minho worked without rest. He studied captured Krath technology and found weaknesses that no one had noticed before. The Krath shields were strong against energy weapons but vulnerable to kinetic strikes. Their sensors could be confused by certain electromagnetic frequencies. Their ships were fast but had limited maneuverability. He developed new missiles, new jamming systems, and new armor. Each invention was tested and improved. Each improvement made the human fleet a little more deadly. General Jiwoo trained the ground forces personally. He was a hard man with a scarred face and a voice that could be heard across a battlefield. He pushed his soldiers beyond their limits again and again. "The Krath think we are soft," he told them. "They think we will break. They think we will run. They are wrong. When you face the enemy, you will remember why you are fighting. You will remember the children in those camps. And you will not stop until every single one of them is free." Admiral Taiho developed the battle strategy with his senior officers. They studied every Krath victory and every Krath weakness. They planned for multiple scenarios and multiple failures. They prepared for the worst and hoped for the best. The fleet grew larger every month. New ships came from the shipyards of Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies. Old ships were repaired and upgraded. By the end of the 14 months, humanity had assembled the largest military force in its history. But numbers were not everything. The Krath still had more ships, more soldiers, and more experience. Humanity had one advantage that could not be measured. They had a cause worth dying for. On the eve of deployment, Commander Yoonji addressed the entire fleet. Her image appeared on screens aboard every ship, in every barracks. In every command center dot, she stood straight and tall. Her white hair pulled back, her eyes steady. 14 months ago, a woman named Lyra crashed on one of our colony worlds. She had traveled across the galaxy, searching for someone who would help her people. She came to us because she heard that humans protect the weak. She came to us because she believed we would care. Yoonji paused. Around her, millions of soldiers and sailors listened in silence. Tomorrow we prove her right. Tomorrow we go to war against an empire that has never been defeated. The galaxy thinks we are foolish. The galaxy thinks we will fail. The galaxy has forgotten what humans are capable of when we fight for something we believe in. Her voice grew stronger. We are not fighting for territory. We are not fighting for resources. We are not fighting for power. We are fighting because innocent people are suffering, and we have the ability to stop it. We are fighting because the strong should protect the weak, not prey upon them. We are fighting because that is who we are. She looked directly into the camera. Many of you will not come home. I wish I could promise otherwise, but I will not lie to you. War has a cost, and we will pay it. But know this, every life you give will save 100 others. Every sacrifice will be remembered. Every victory will bring us closer to a galaxy where the helpless do not have to live in fear. She raised her hand in salute. To the fleet, I give one order. Protect the Volani. Destroy the Krath. Show the galaxy what it means to have humanity as your friend. Across human space, millions of hands rose in answering salute. The next morning, the fleet departed. Hundreds of warships moved in formation, their engines bright against the darkness of space. Behind them, The human worlds grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared entirely. Ahead lay the Volani homeworld. Ahead lay the Krath Dominion. Ahead lay the greatest challenge humanity had ever faced. On the bridge of the flagship, Admiral Taiho watched the stars streak past. Beside him, a small holographic image showed Lyra and her daughter, now safe on New Bizon. The child was smiling, playing with a human toy someone had given her. Taiho looked at that image for a long time. Then he turned to his crew. All hands, battle stations. We have a promise to keep. The Krath had conquered 40 species. They had fought 100 wars. They had never lost. They expected no resistance from the humans. After all, what could a young species with a small fleet do against the might of the Dominion? They were about to find out. The first battle took place at Volani Prime. The Krath had 300 warships guarding the occupied planet. They had ground forces in every major city. They had orbital weapons pointed at the surface, ready to destroy anything that tried to escape. The Krath commander was drinking tea when the alarms began to sound. He looked at his sensors and saw something impossible. Human ships were emerging from faster-than-light travel. Not at a safe distance, but directly in the middle of his formation. They were already firing. The first Krath ship exploded before it could raise its shields. Admiral Taiho had studied the Krath for 14 months. He knew they expected their enemies to arrive carefully, to scout, to negotiate, to look for a peaceful solution. He gave them none of that. His doctrine was simple: overwhelming force, zero hesitation. No mercy. The human fleet tore through the Krath formation like a storm through leaves. Missiles designed by Dr. Minho punched through Krath shields. Jamming systems confused Krath sensors. Human pilots flew with a ferocity the Krath had never seen before. Sujin was in the first wave. Her squadron was assigned to take out the orbital weapons threatening the planet below. She flew her fighter through a wall of enemy fire, her hands steady on the controls, her eyes fixed on her target. Around her, ships exploded. Friends she had trained with died in flashes of light. But she did not stop. She could not stop. Every time she felt fear, she remembered the footage of those children. She remembered why she was here. She fired her missiles at the orbital platform. The explosion was bright enough to be seen from the planet's surface. Below, Volani prisoners looked up at the sky and saw fire raining down upon their captors. For the first time in months, they felt hope. The Battle of Volani Prime lasted 6 hours. By the end, every Krath ship was destroyed or captured. The orbital platforms were gone. The ground forces were isolated and surrounded. General Jiwoo led the landing personally. His soldiers dropped from the sky in armored transports, landing in the middle of Krath positions. The fighting was brutal and close. The Krath were strong and well-armed, but they had never faced enemies who refused to retreat. In the capital city, Jiwoo found a labor camp holding 10,000 Volani prisoners. The Krath guards tried to use the prisoners as shields. Jiwoo's snipers took them down one by one, never hitting a single prisoner. When the camp was liberated, the Volani came out slowly, blinking in the sunlight. Many of them were crying. Some fell to their knees. An old Volani man approached Jiwoo. He was thin and weak from months of hard labor, but his eyes were bright with tears. "You came," he whispered. "You actually came." Jiwoo helped him stand. "We made a promise." But Volani Prime was only the beginning. Commander Yoonji understood that liberating one world meant nothing if the Krath could regroup and attack again. The plan had never been rescue. The plan was total destruction of Krath military power. Human fleets struck 17 Krath installations simultaneously. They attacked shipyards, military bases, supply depots, and command centers. The Krath, spread across their vast empire, could not respond fast enough. By the time they organized a counterattack, another 3 bases had fallen. the war spread across multiple star systems. Human soldiers landed on occupied worlds, fighting beside local resistance movements. Species that had surrendered to the Krath years ago saw a chance for freedom and rose up against their oppressors. Sujin became a legend after the Battle of Korith Station. Her squadron was assigned to hold a critical supply line while the main fleet engaged the Krath 7th Armada. The Krath sent 50 ships to break through. Sujin had 15. The battle lasted 9 hours. Sujin's squadron lost 2/3 of their ships, but they never retreated. They held the line until reinforcements arrived. When the battle ended, Sujin had destroyed 8 enemy ships personally. Her own fighter was barely holding together. When she landed, her commanding officer asked how she had survived. "I did not think about surviving," Sujin answered. "I only thought about the people counting on us." The Krath High Command watched their empire crumble. For the first time in their history, they faced an enemy who did not negotiate, did not surrender, and did not stop. They had no protocol for this. They had no strategy. In desperation, they sent a message to Earth. "Cease hostilities immediately. We will release all Valani prisoners. We will pay any reparations you demand. We will withdraw from Valani space entirely. Name your price, and we will pay it. There is no need for more bloodshed." Commander Yunji read the message in her command center on Earth. She had not slept in 3 days. Around her, reports came in from every front. The human forces were winning, but the cost was high. Thousands of soldiers had died. Dozens of ships had been lost. She thought about accepting the offer. It would end the war. It would save lives. The Valani would be free. But she also thought about the other species the Krath had enslaved. She thought about the 40 civilizations living in fear under Krath rule. She thought about what would happen if the Krath were allowed to rebuild their military in 10 or 20 years. She wrote her response carefully. Then she broadcast it on all frequencies, so every ship in the human fleet and every Krath commander would hear it. "Your offer is rejected. You misunderstand the purpose of this war. We did not come to negotiate. We did not come to free one species and leave the others in chains. We came to ensure that you never threaten anyone again. The war ends when the Krath Dominion no longer exists as a military power. Not before." The Krath leaders listened to her words in shock. No species had ever refused their offer of peace. No species had ever demanded their complete destruction. But humanity was not like other species. The war continued for 11 months. The Krath fought with increasing desperation, but they could not stop the human advance. One by one, their bases fell. One by one, their fleets were destroyed. One by one, the species they had enslaved were freed in the final battle. Admiral Taiho led the assault on the Krath homeworld itself. The Krath threw everything they had left into the defense. It was not enough. Human ships broke through the orbital defenses and landed soldiers on the surface. General Jiwoo accepted the surrender of the last Krath military commander in the ruins of their capital city. The commander looked at him with confusion in his eyes. "Why?" the Krath asked. "Why did you sacrifice so much for species that were not your own? You gained nothing from this war. You lost thousands of your people. We would have left you alone." Jiwoo looked at him for a long moment. "Because they asked for help," he said finally. "Because no one else would give it. Because that is what humans do." The commander shook his head. "I do not understand your species." Jiwoo smiled grimly. "No, you do not. The war was over. The Krath Dominion was defeated. And across the galaxy, the word spread. Humanity had done what no one believed was possible." The Galactic Assembly met in emergency session 1 week after the Krath surrender. The great chamber that had witnessed thousands of years of careful diplomacy was filled with tension. The 12 elder species sat in their high seats, looking down at the human delegation with expressions that mixed fear, respect, and confusion. Ambassador Dowan walked to the center of the chamber. The last time he had stood here, he had been dismissed as a representative of an unimportant young species. Now, every eye in the room followed him. He did not speak immediately. He let the silence build. He wanted them to remember. 11 months ago, I stood in this chamber and asked for your help. I showed you evidence of genocide. I showed you children being torn from their parents. I showed you an entire civilization being destroyed. And you told me that it was too expensive to care. You told me that trade routes were more important than lives. You told me to do nothing. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Humanity chose differently. He pressed a button and the holographic displays lit up with images. But these were not images of suffering. These were images of liberation. Valani prisoners walking free from labor camps. Krath military bases burning under human assault. 40 species celebrating their freedom for the first time in generations. In 11 months of war, humanity destroyed the Krath dominion completely. We dismantled their military, occupied their homeworld, and freed every species they had enslaved. We did this with a fleet 1/4 the size of theirs. We did this without any support from the Galactic Assembly. We did this because it was right. The chamber was absolutely silent. Our losses were significant. 14,000 human soldiers and sailors gave their lives in this war. 93 ships were destroyed. The economic cost will take a generation to recover. We knew these costs before we began, and we chose to pay them anyway. Dohan looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representative after representative. We are not here to demand payment. We are not here to claim new territory. The Krath worlds will govern themselves under temporary observation until they prove they can be trusted. The freed species will receive humanitarian assistance until they can rebuild. We ask nothing in return for what we have done. Speaker Morvith of the Sindari finally spoke. His voice was uncertain in a way it had never been before. Ambassador Dowan, the Assembly, acknowledges what humanity has accomplished. It is unprecedented. But we must ask, why? Why sacrifice so much for species you had never met? Why take on a war you could have avoided? What do you gain? Dowan's expression did not change. When the Valani came to us, they were dying. They had sent messages to every species in the galaxy, begging for help. Everyone refused. Everyone except us. He paused. They came to humanity because they had heard stories. Stories about a young species that fights for the weak. Stories about a civilization that believes the strong should protect the helpless. They came to us because they hoped those stories were true. His voice grew quieter, but somehow more powerful. We proved that they were. He stepped forward. Speaker Morvith, you asked what we gain. Let me tell you. We gain nothing material. But we gain something more valuable than territory or resources or trade agreements. We gain the knowledge that when innocent people asked for our help, we gave it. We gain the right to look at ourselves and know that we did not stand by while evil triumphed. We gain our souls. The chamber remained silent. Morvith had no response. Dowan turned to address the entire assembly one final time. Let this be a message to every species in this galaxy. Humanity protects its friends. We do not care about the cost. We do not care about the odds. If you stand with us, we will stand with you. And if you harm those under our protection, we will find you. We will fight you. And we will win. He walked out of the chamber without waiting for a response. Far across the galaxy, on the surface of Valani Prime, Lyra stood in the ruins of her capital city. The buildings around her were burned and broken. The streets were filled with debris. But crews were already working to clear the rubble. Already, the rebuilding had begun. Admiral Taiho stood beside her, overseeing the delivery of humanitarian supplies. Ships from human worlds arrived daily, bringing food, medicine, and construction materials. Human volunteers worked alongside Vellani survivors, helping to rebuild what the Krath had destroyed. Lyra's daughter played nearby, laughing at something a human child had said. The two children were teaching each other words from their languages, pointing at objects and repeating sounds. 2 years ago, I watched my city burn, Lyra said quietly. I held my daughter and thought we would die. I thought our entire species would disappear, and no one would remember us. She turned to look at Taiho. Then you came. You crossed the galaxy, fought a war against an empire that had never been defeated, and sacrificed thousands of your own people. For us, for people you had never met. Taiho watched the children playing. We made a promise. Lyra shook her head slowly. It was more than a promise. You could have done what the assembly did. You could have expressed sympathy and done nothing. No one would have blamed you. The Krath were too powerful. The risk was too great. Every logical argument said to stay away. Since when has humanity ever been logical? Taiho said with a slight smile. Lyra laughed softly. It was the first time she had laughed in 2 years. We will rebuild, she said. And we will remember. Every Vellani child born from now until the stars grow cold will learn about the species that answered when we called. Your names will be in our songs. Your faces will be in our art. You saved us, Taiho. You saved all of us. Taiho was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke. Just do us one favor. Anything. If you ever hear of another species in trouble, another people with nowhere to turn, tell them about us. Tell them that humans protect their own. And once you are under our protection, he looked at her with steady eyes. You are family. Lyra reached out and took his hand. I will tell them. I will tell everyone. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. Species that had lived in fear for centuries heard the story of what humanity had done. Small civilizations that had been threatened by larger neighbors began sending messages to Earth. They asked not for military alliances or trade agreements. They asked for one thing, only friendship. One by one, they came. Species of every shape and size, from every corner of the galaxy. They told their stories. They shared their fears. And humanity listened. Humanity remembered its own history. All the times when the weak had been crushed by the strong, when the helpless had been abandoned by those who could have saved them. Humanity decided that in this galaxy, things would be different. The Galactic Assembly never recovered its power. The elder species had shown themselves to be cowards, and the younger species no longer trusted them. A new coalition began to form, with humanity at its center. Not an empire, not a dominion, but a family of species who had made a simple agreement. We protect each other. On Earth, Commander Yunji finally retired. She had led humanity through its greatest war, and now she was tired. Her last official act was to attend a memorial ceremony for the 14,000 soldiers and sailors who had given their lives. She stood before a great wall of names and read each one silently. These were her people. These were the ones who had answered when she called. These were the heroes who had proven that humanity was worth its own ideals. When the ceremony ended, a young woman approached her. It was Sujin, the pilot who had held the line at Korith Station. She had survived the war, though many of her friends had not. Commander, Sujin said, may I ask you something? Yunji nodded. Was it worth it? All the death, all the suffering, all the loss? If you could go back to the beginning, would you make the same choice? Yunji looked at the wall of names for a long time. Then she turned to Sujin. Every name on this wall is a tragedy. Every one of them had a family, a future, dreams that will never come true. Their deaths will haunt me for the rest of my life. She paused. But because of what they did, millions of people are free today. Because of what they did, 40 species no longer live in fear. Because of what they did, no child in this galaxy has to wonder if anyone will help them when they are suffering. She put her hand on Sujin's shoulder. Yes, it was worth it. And yes, I would make the same choice. Every single time. Sujin nodded slowly. Then she saluted and walked away. Yoonji watched her go. Then she turned back to the wall of names and whispered 2 words that no one else could hear. Thank you. And across the galaxy, wherever sentient beings gathered and spoke of the future, a new phrase had entered the common language. It was said in hope by the oppressed and in warning by the powerful. It was carved into monuments on freed worlds and taught to children in their first years of school. 2 simple words that meant more than any treaty or weapon or army. Humanity protects.